Resuming debate. Reprise du débat, l'honorable député de la...
Honourable member for La Salle. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I am bidding my farewell, my last speech in this place, and I would like to start by thanking the people of my riding who have given me at 3 separate occasions the responsibility of representing them in this honorable chamber. I am also leaving my other intellectual house, the Faculty of Law of the McGill University, and these 2 events together mean that it's a very moving day for me. Serving as a member of parliament, as parliamentary secretary, and as the Minister of Justice has been, Madam Speaker, the peak of my professional career. And I did not miss a single moment.
With friends today in this place, moments, a series of moments that are indelibly etched in my brain, in my heart, ranging from laughter to tears and everything in between, from Vancouver to St. John's, from Inuvik to Iqaluit to Nain, and around the world, in Europe, in Asia, and in South America. But I
would like to start in my riding, La Salle Verdun, where I buy my vinyls on Wellington Street.
Managed to get to Fred's Records and filled my bags with many good vinyls, which I would then spin in my office. And everybody knows that Justice 306, Brian Tobin and Anne McClellan have told us this, is the best office on the Hill. And at impromptu gatherings with my team, many of whom are here, such as when we passed the MMP's bill, and we'd spin some vinyl and have some fun and honor those and thank each other for the work that we'd done to make those moments special. There were many humorous moments, Madam Speaker. I sat for 2 years as the benchmate to Roger Kusner, who's now in the other place, including 2 Christmas speeches. And I won't attribute my sense of humor to Kusner because his is quite unique, but it was certainly a wonderful experience.
And I very quickly learned as a member of parliament to put on the earpiece when the member for Rosemont took the floor.
Sitting at a table with Rana Ambrose and hearing her speech, and those of you who were there remember it well. Or driving through Rome with our ambassador and watching the havoc being wreaked by the police escort that we had. I don't have hair, Mr. Speaker, but I wouldn't have after that anyway. And then later that evening going to VIP Pizza, not the finest culinary experience in Rome, but still a good one. And throwing my suitcase in the back of a Ford F-150 in a rented F-150 when we were traveling in the north. There were serious moments too, Mr. Speaker. The swearings in at Rideau Hall as cabinet ministers and the swearing in as an MP on 3 occasions. Signing a proclamation at Rideau Hall proclaiming Charles, the King of Canada, a one-time experience. Listening to the stories of Italian-Canadian families whose grandfathers or great-grandfathers were interned during the Second World War. And realizing that I was the Minister of Justice and that a previous Minister of Justice had signed a decree to intern those people. Working with my Italian-Canadian colleagues in the House to get that apology done. And attending a memorial unveiling in the riding of the former Speaker in North Bay with the indefatigable Joyce Pillarella. Meeting David Milgaard, Mr. Speaker, in my office with James Lockyer, and promising him that we would create an independent commission to review wrongful convictions. And having David Milgaard sign my album by the Tragically Hip Fully Completely, which contains the song Wheat Kings, which they wrote about him. And having his sister Susan present to announce the tabling of Bill C-40. And Mr. Speaker, I won't be smiling fully until that bill reaches royal assent. this summer at the G7 in Japan, realizing I was the senior justice minister around the table. And my first conversation with Attorney General Merrick Garland of the United States, we'd finished our agenda, and I got a chance to ask him whether the HBO series on the Unabomber was in fact accurate. And hearing Attorney General Garland's voice light up as he went on for 10 minutes about the accuracy and inaccuracy of the portrayal of the Unabomber case, but he was generally favorable, and it was an important moment in his career. Lorsque j'étais secrétaire parlementaire,
when I was Parliamentary Secretary for International Commerce, I went to Namur to sell the free trade agreement with the Europeans in Wallonia, and I was briefed to be the bad cop, as you would say in good French, and it was very fun. Then it took us a couple more weeks to reach an agreement, and in the same vein, I was the bad cop with Boeing at Farnborough Air Show in England, because we had a case with Boeing. There were other ministers as well, and they went in to establish peace after.
It's on the hockey rink. This is Canada after all, and I still do try to lace up my skates, notwithstanding advanced age. A wonderful moment in Gananoque when a number of us in this House were celebrating the life and memory of our former colleague, the late Gord Brown. And I won't forget that, because it was a wonderful nonpartisan moment, and I was proud to be part of it. And then at a Métis ITK hockey game, in which my defense partner, Mr. Speaker, was 45 years younger than me, and one of the best players on the ice. She was fantastic. Our first game in the Ottawa Senators Arena against the Conservative Party, where the Liberals got their backsides kicked. And finally a game on the hill, on the ice rink that was here for the 150th anniversary celebration against a group of very young and impressive Mohawks from Gananoque. Again, the result was never in doubt. The only thing I would say that ties those last number of games together was the near complete incompetence of our goaltender, the current Minister of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, exchanging puns on jeopardy and jeopardy metaphors with Chief Justice Rudy Couillard of Alberta and with, she was then Chief Justice Mary Moreau of Alberta, in our speeches at Chief Justice Couillard's swearing in Edmonton. A number of memories walking, Mr. Speaker, walking with the member from Prince Albert, talking about trade, but talking more about our families. Walking with Alex Steinhaus in Yellowknife on a hike. It was absolutely stunning. Walking with Aluki Kotiurk and Natan Obed in the hills above Nain. Walking to the hill every morning from my Ottawa apartment. Walking across the floor when I first became Minister of Justice to tell the member from Edmonton St. Albert that I was going to support his private member's bill on supporting juries. And I was proud of that moment, and I still am. And proud of some historic moments in this House when, for example, we voted unanimously on a bill to outlaw conversion therapy. I will be forever grateful not only to the members of my caucus, but to the member from Esquimalt Saint-Suk, as well as the member from Calgary Nose Hill and the member from Muskoka, and Aaron O'Toole for the work that they did to make that unanimous vote a reality. We saved lives that day, Mr. Speaker. We saved lives. When the then Minister of Public Safety, the member from Eglinton Lawrence, and I sat down with provincial and territorial ministers of justice and public safety ministers to get to a unanimous agreement on bail reform and a commitment not only for our federal legislation, which is now law, but also a commitment from the provinces to work at their end to make the bail system work better. And moments with Black community leadership across Canada on the Black Justice Strategy, and in particular in Nova Scotia, where there was a pride in the room, a very real pride in that community because of their leadership on creating the movement towards pre-sentencing reports. Many moments, Mr. Speaker, were with Indigenous leadership across Canada, many of whom I now count as close friends. But a moment in Williams Lake at a site of a former residential school where I went into the barn where a number of the children would go back in the day and they'd carve their names in the wood. It's not something I will ever forget, Mr. Speaker. On a positive side, the pride of the Chilcotin leadership when I would meet them annually here in Ottawa, but also met them in their offices in the BC interior. The pride of having established their Indigenous title using the courts and having succeeded. Mr. Speaker, in Iqaluit, as a guest of President Obed of ITK, I was in the room when the Pope Francis, heard the stories directly from survivors or the children of survivors of sexual abuse. And I saw the reaction of the Pope, and also in particular the reaction of the Archbishop who was translating. And at a certain point, the Pope put his hand on the translator's shoulder because of the difficulty he was having in relaying the words. There were other momentous moments, Mr. Speaker. The House rising for what we thought was 2 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. All the urgent committees and committee work we did during the pandemic and the occupation, and the understanding of the gravity of the Emergencies Act. But these were balanced by lighter moments, Mr. Speaker. Trying to buy a white suit online so that I could represent Canada at the swearing-in of the President of the Dominican Republic. I had to buy 2 suits and then keep the one that fit. And then getting on a plane to the Dominican Republic and sitting down beside Moise Alou and talking baseball the whole way down. Bicycling along the Lachine Canal and seeing the work that we had done as a government on rebuilding the walls of that canal and knowing that they were going to be there for my children and my grandchildren. Being stopped on Wellington, Mr. Speaker, by an older gentleman. Et il m'a dit, Monsieur Lametti, je vous...
He said, Mr. Lametti, I often see you on Verdant Beach.
With an oyster bar in the middle of Wellington Street. I had just been outed. Des cafés chez AJ's, chez Shooter.
Coffees at AJ's, Shooters, and others, at Station W, and now at Café Monk. Conversations with my constituents on Saturday mornings when I went to buy my bread and when I would go to buy my sandwiches. Holding up the statue of Saint Antoine with the Italian community.
Things of a life, Mr. Speaker, and I will cherish them. And I thank those people who were involved in making those moments a reality, and many of whom are in this room and in the gallery. Some final points, Mr. Speaker. I want to underscore that UNDRIP is the future. It will allow us to reset our relationship with Indigenous peoples and is a true roadmap, a co-developed roadmap to reconciliation. It's a singular moment, Mr. Speaker. Indigenous leadership wants to participate in nation building. I've heard this time and time again, that they wanted to be part of this project, Canada, and they wanted their children to have the same opportunities as other non-Indigenous kids have had. As I have had, Mr. Speaker. I'm the son of Italian immigrants who came to this country with no formal education. And because they chose to come to this country, I got to have an outstanding education at Canadian universities and at international universities. And because they made this decision, I got to be a professor at an outstanding law faculty in Canada. And because of the decision they made, I could run for Member of Parliament and even aspire to be Minister of Justice. Indigenous peoples want to share in that dream. And UNDRIP is a way for us together to make it happen. We are many nations of this country, Mr. Speaker, and that is a source of strength moving forward in the future, and it's a source of understanding. It allows us, this recognition allows us to work on what unites us and to develop and protect languages and culture. This is true for Indigenous peoples. This is also true for Quebec. C'est aussi vrai pour le Québec. On doit travailler.
It's true. For Quebec, we must work together. We all understand that the protection of French language and culture in North America is essential. We have to work together to make sure that this can continue and even flourish in the future.
And that means, Mr. Speaker, we need to stop scapegoating the English community in Quebec, who are very bilingual and who are committed to Quebec, and in many cases who have been there for 300 years. La Charte, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, the Charter is not optional. The preventative use of the Charter is a way to say that the Charter is optional.
With everything we've said, Mr. Speaker, we need to understand that constitutional change will be necessary, and we need to prepare for that. We need to be able to disagree with respect, Mr. Speaker, and recent weeks have underscored that. I tried to be only as partisan as I had to be, only as partisan as necessary, and not get personal. I didn't always succeed, but I did do my best, and I think we all need to do our best, especially on social media, especially in this world where we're moving towards artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence doesn't exempt us from being human, Mr. Speaker. Our human intellect and our emotions and our empathy will become even more important as AI supplements the more routine forms of intelligence. But we cannot let it replace those other human qualities. Our survival as a country and as a species depends on nothing less. Mr. Speaker, so it remains to thank people, to thank the Prime Minister for naming me Parliamentary Secretary and Minister of Justice. Pour remercier mes collègues ici,
to thank my colleagues here in the House, and especially my critics, the member for Fundy Royal, the member for Esquimalt-Saanich-Sooke, the member for Saint-Jérôme, and for medical assistant in dying, the member for Montcalm.
Doran and Alex Steinhaus have been fantastic, and my political teams have been outstanding. Mr. Speaker, none of what we achieved could have been done without them, and I thank them. I thank to my constituency teams for their dedication and their hard work and service, oftentimes when I wasn't around much as a minister, and in particular I want to thank Nicole Pichet, who has been with me for 8 years. Excellent. I want to thank other elected officials in my riding at all political levels and of all political parties with whom I worked. I want to thank my political association, my volunteers, and my donors who helped me get elected. My friends, Mr. Speaker, kept me grounded. Here in Ottawa, Mélanie Vadeboncoeur and the La Roma gang made sure that I stayed humble. Many friends in this place, Mr. Speaker, the member from Eglinton Lawrence, the current minister of Immigration, the member from Thunder Bay Superior North, the member from Oakville, and Kath McKenna, and everybody else that has come through this place, Mr. Speaker, and with whom I hope to stay friends. My friends at McGill, Mr. Speaker, and their deans for their support. My ex-wife, Geneviève Sommier, who began this journey with me, and with whom I still share 3 wonderful kids, and who continues to give me good advice. And my children, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the years away have been the hardest on them. André, Gabrielle, et Dominique, je vous aime. Merci.
I love you. Thank you for your patience and for your dedication to your father.
Mr. Speaker, 2 points. Kindness is not overrated, especially not in a world of AI. And we could all stand to be more kind, and we would all be better for it. And finally, Mr. Speaker, this place is not overrated. The Right Honourable Paul Martin has said, "You can get more done in 5 minutes in this place than you can in 5 years anywhere else." Paul has been a mentor to me. I'm a successor in his riding, and he is a friend. Et j'aimerais, Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, I would hope that we will prove him right every single day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Esquimalt-Saanich-Sooke.
Much, Mr. Speaker. This is a difficult moment for me, not just because I had to find a new seat near the exit, and it took me 2 tries to get here to Ottawa because of the fog, and not just because I come from an Irish family of criers, but it's really a moving moment for me, and I want to thank the member for LaSalle-Aimard for the friendship that we've developed here in this House. He has a great record of accomplishment, which he spoke about. But what I want to point out is something that someone asked me about on the plane last night, saying, how can you go to work in such a negative place? And I said, unfortunately, all you see is question period, which is theater, where people have other agendas they're pursuing. You don't see the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. You don't see the cooperation, and you don't see the friendships that are built up. And I really meant that, and the member for Salamard is one of the great examples of that. When I made a quick list, because I had 15 minutes notice I had this opportunity. But when I look at the number of things he and I worked on together, and his willingness to take action to make sure that we improve the justice system in Canada, in particular for Indigenous people, and the work that he did on Bill C-5 to reduce mandatory minimums, which fall very hard on the most marginalized in our society. He mentioned the conversion therapy ban, where his work with the leader of the Conservatives and with all parties meant we were able to pass that ban unanimously, something which I remain very proud of this House for doing. The work that he did, which we're not quite finished with, on C-40, on the Miscarriages of Justice Commission, again, where miscarriages of justice fall very hard on the most marginalized, and in particular Indigenous women in this country. And my pledge to him is I'm going to work as hard as I can to get that done, hopefully by, I want to call it the end of this month. We've only got a couple of days, but I think we can get that done. He also helped shepherd medical assistance in dying legislation through this House, where I was initially the NDP critic. And I have to say, this was the most difficult issue in my 13 years here because of the very strong feelings on all sides of the issue. And the minister always demonstrated his ability to listen and to be empathetic and to try and find solutions that would keep us all together on this very important issue about reducing suffering at the end of life, not just for the person, but for the families of people who need that assistance at the end. And so, again, one last one I'll mention is I approached the minister about the publication ban on survivors of sexual assault and how many of them felt stifled by that publication ban. And the minister, at the time, responded with, what can we do? How can we fix this? And eventually he agreed to add the ability to lift the publication ban to S12, and it came through the House. And it was an example of how, when I could approach him with an idea and a problem, that he always looked for solutions and a way to bring us all together. And I know that he will continue to contribute to Canada once he leaves this House. I'm not sure in exactly what way. I'm not sure he's sure in exactly what way. But he's one of the finest members of Parliament I've ever had the privilege to work with. I thank him for his contributions here.
And since this is the abridged version of Q's and C's, we'll just go on to the next speakers. L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's with some emotion that I take the floor to commend the work of the Honourable Member, for whom we have a lot of respect. I remember, Mr. Speaker, when I was appointed Minister, I had to talk about all the appointments that had been made, and a journalist asked me, what do you think of Mr. Lametti, if I can name him, his appointment, Minister for Justice? And I'm part of the official opposition, so we have to be the loyal opposition, of course. So I found something not so nice to say, but it was difficult because I started reading the minister's CV and I said, well, he's a legal expert, he's a university professor, he has been cited throughout Canada, he is very much involved in the justice world. So it was very difficult for me I couldn't find something bad to say about him. So I said, why didn't the Prime Minister appoint him sooner? Every time, Mr. Speaker, when there are question periods, when we have to defend ourselves in 30, 35 seconds, it's difficult. It's true that sometimes it's a bit brutal, hard-hitting, but I've always had intelligent and articulate conversations with my reasonable Minister of Justice colleague. We are worlds apart on many subjects, but I would like to thank him for the attention he granted to me when I was to be consulted. He always did so with honour and dignity. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to remind everyone that what he had to say about his family is what many of us have to say. I'm also the child of an immigrant, Italians as well. So I've always felt the responsibility of continuing what my parents did by choosing this country and by having been chosen by this country. The minister comes from an immigrant family. And then he's had an amazing academic and educational career. What I must say is that he has brought honour to his family. This is something I often have to say to my honourable colleague from the province of Quebec, someone who has experience of the executive branch. What I would like to say is that I will be following Mr. Lametti's career so that we can hear his skills and knowledge for years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, if I may, I would like to turn towards my friend, amico mio. There are so many things to say to a colleague who has served with such distinction. The minister has thanked many people, but it's my turn to thank him. It's our turn to thank him. I would like to make a prediction. The minister will go down in history as a great Minister of Justice, as a great Solicitor General. He has worked hard here. He is a man with a great heart. He has great conviction, and he is a true leader. And all Canadians have appreciated his work, but over the years, people will continue to realize how much his tenure as Minister of Justice will have impacted Canada. This is a minister who has furthered the foundations of reconciliation. Without revealing secrets, I've seen him in action.
About moments. How many moments, I would say, the minister has been crucial in the future of this nation? How many times, Mr. Speaker, when you talk about dreams, I could imagine the young students around this country looking at someone like him with great intellect. I mean, all of my colleagues have recognized that. But I'm sure that today and also in the future, it will make our young generation dream. Dream of public service, dream of what's possible, dream of following your conviction, dream of being who you are, and dream of making changes. And that is what the Minister of Justice was. Mr. Speaker, we'll remember him for kindness. I have known a lot of people in this place, but very few, and I think all of my colleagues would agree, kindness is something that, although he attributes kindness, and he said we need more kindness, you have embodied kindness since every day that I've met you, my friend. And when I think about getting things done, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if there will be as many Minister of Justice in the history of this country that could have the record of approving so many bills in this House, but bills also that will change the nature of this country, Mr. Speaker, for whom we should all be proud. And Mr. Speaker, one thing that I will say, I have yet to meet someone who has the same type of deep respect for the institution that we serve, Mr. Speaker. And if he has achieved a lot of things in his life and he's going to achieve much more in the future, we talk about his future career, and trust me, Mr. Speaker, opportunities and possibilities were endless. He just had to pick one. But I would say, Mr. Speaker, one thing that he will be remember is the respect for the institution. And I think if we keep that in your service to the nation, my dear friend David, I think this country owes a lot to you. I think future generation will look to you as a leader. And I think that we all will miss you very much, my dear friend. Grazie, amico mio.
The Honourable Member for Rivière du Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to add my voice to those of my colleagues. Those who have thanked our colleague for La Salle-et-Mar Verdun, thanked him for his exceptional work here in the House of Commons since he arrived 8 years ago now. We arrived at the same time, Mr. Speaker, in 2015. At the time, I thought that I would be Minister of Justice, but unfortunately that was not the case. But I was able to talk to the various Ministers of Justice many times. The member for La Salle-et-Mar Verdun has done excellent work as Minister for Justice. We weren't always in agreement. Of course, I tried to convince him. Well, we talked about dreams. I tried to convince him that Canada would be much happier with a respectful neighbour, a good independent Quebec that would work with Canada on a number of files. But the member for La Salle-et-Mar Verdun never quite agreed with my point of view. He didn't agree also when I talked to him about the appointment of judges and justices. I wouldn't say these were conflicts, but there were just differences in opinion. What I noted is that on each of these individual files and different opinions we could have on certain matters, he was always respectful in his behavior, in his words. The member for La Salle-et-Mar Verdun is someone who I can qualify and who I can happily call a gentleman. I've had great discourse with him, where we've agreed and where we have disagreed, of course. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to commend the private market for having convinced the member for La Salle-et-Mar Verdun to join them. As far as I'm concerned, I was listening to my colleague who was saying earlier, why did the Prime Minister not appoint him sooner? I would like to say, why hasn't he kept him as Minister for Justice? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think that the Honourable Member for Saint Gulf Island has a few words to say.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues. I just wanted to highlight the comments of all my other colleagues.
A lot about the Honourable Member from La Salle-et-Mar Verdun as a former Minister of Justice and a member of a cabinet, when so many of his colleagues who worked with him closely from the opposition benches rise to praise his work and thank him for his collegiality, particularly my neighbor from Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke, who shared in so many of those victories in abolishing the horrible practices. Well, we've spoken of it unanimously. We have here also, I was very moved by the words from the Honourable Member from Louis Saint-Laurent, who spoke so clearly and eloquently of his appreciation for the work of a Liberal cabinet member. We could hear more of that sort of thing in this place. Maybe they shouldn't have to resign or die before we say nice things. I'm thinking of our tributes to Ed Broadbent the other day. Sorry about that. No one has died recently. I just want to say again, from my point of view, as a member of the Green Party, and of course, merci aussi pour les...
Thank you as well for the comments from the bloc as well from our colleague from Rivière du Nord.
Touched so many times by my friend's willingness to share things in moments that were very, very stressful. And I'm not pointing out anything that the rest of you don't know. I don't represent a big caucus here. I'm not my caucus's critic on justice. I have half the files, and ministers who have time to share confidential information, trusting that I can be trusted, that we can share difficult conversations, particularly during the occupation. I will always be grateful for friendship and for the enormous privilege of sharing even a little in those conversations, those votes, and those very tough decisions. I will be clear, I wish you weren't leaving. And I know I've just broken a rule, Mr. Speaker, by speaking directly. I know you, Mr. Speaker, are not leaving, but I needed to speak personally for just 1 nanosecond. Be well. Have a wonderful, wonderful next phase of a very long career and a very long life. Be well. God bless you. Thank you.
Now, I would also just add my little story to this one as well, is that the opportunity that I had one night at the airport in Halifax is to be late for that airplane. Or the airplane was late for us. So the honourable member was on the same flight as I was, and we were going to miss our connection in Montreal. And thinking he was, from Montreal, that he'd be staying at his house that night. No, because of his perseverance, because of his hard work ethic, he was on his way to Ottawa that evening as well. I was lucky enough that my wife and I were able to jump into his ministerial car, fit in the third row, and not listen to any of the discussions that were happening inside the car because they were still working that evening. But did get my wife and I here to Ottawa, and something he didn't have to do. He could have easily said, enjoy your night staying in Ottawa, in Montreal, and get to Ottawa in the morning. But the gentleman that he always is did find the opportunity to put us in there. And there might have been an exchange of a certain liquid, in this case, I think it was a moonshine that we were going to share on that one, on it. But I just wanted to say, on behalf of the 338 members who sit in this House of Commons, to thank the honourable member for his service to Canada, and we're going to miss him, and like we would say in French, tu nous manques.
We'll miss you.
You will be missing from us, and I think that's important. That we've done something for Canada and for this chamber, and we will always be reconnaissant for that work. So to the honourable members, to everyone who participated in the discussion this afternoon, thank you so much for the opportunity. Bonne chance.